What's up, everyone? My name is Sara Dietschy, rhymes with Peachy. Welcome to another video, kind of. WWDC 2020 just happened, and this was supposed to be a live stream, but even though I have all these gadgets and gizmos, I just couldn't figure out how to live stream from Zoom. I got my camera hooked up to Zoom, and I got this audio, but I'll have to perfect that process later. So basically right now, we're just gonna do kind of like a video podcast with two of my developer friends. So we're really gonna get what do the developers think about WWDC 2020. We didn't get any hardware announcements, so no iMac, no new iMac with the iPad design language, no new AirPods Pro. So this was all focused on the updates for iOS, iPadOS, and macOS with a lot of cool features for privacy. Apple Pencil, we have spatial sound with AirPods, we have new watch faces, we have bike directions on the watch, security, home app, macOS, Big Sur, all the things. And then the big thing, which we're really going to focus on today, was the ARM-based processors, Apple Silicon. They have announced that. So we're going to get into that. Welcome to like a little video podcast, I guess. That's me making an excuse for not over editing this because I want to get this out quick. Okay, so I'm here with Matt and Alexis. They are my friends who are also programmers. Obviously, I'm not a developer. 3.5 years in computer science doesn't really give you a lot if you're not trying. So they're going to give you the developer experience. This live stream live because it was pre-recorded. I think Apple really nailed it. The video looked beautiful, the transitions though. But I'm going to take this moment on this Zoom call to chat with Alexis and Matt because we watched this together, had some commentary throughout. So I'm going to give them a chance to kind of just intro yourselves, and then we'll kind of just hop into some things that we noticed, and you guys can give us more of maybe a developer perspective. So Alexis, you first. Tell the people who you are.
I'm Alexis. I am 19. I go to NYU and I study computer science. I've been a WWDC scholar, and I've done code with Classy, so I've worked with Apple's interfaces on creating apps and stuff like that. So I was really excited to see this all unravel.
Thanks for having me. My name's Matt. I've been at WWDC just a couple times, and I have an opportunity to help build applications for a large media services integrator called Synesys.io. And that we work with people from NBC to Complex, all sorts of different people. I help build custom applications and workflow development for that, as well as run my own software company that services all sorts of different industries and social media, asset management, network time synchronization, all sorts of fun things. So this was of a really interesting WWDC. First, because of how well it was produced from a video standpoint. And Sara and I's background in the video world and working together for many years, and that was those transitions pretty cool. So that was neat.
So good.
Definitely a neat thing to see how they captivated the experience from the beginning and made it interesting, I thought.
For sure. Alexis, as someone who's kind of been thrown into this world over the past, I mean, I would say 4 or 5 years. When did you start programming?
I started properly programming, like words and all, probably like 9th grade. So,
oh, okay.
So about 5-ish years, I would say, is accurate. Yeah.
Yeah. And for the things that you work on and are learning as an NYU student, I'm curious, what is the, like, do students get excited about this stuff when it comes to developing for Mac, for iPad, for phone, or is the general consensus, I want to develop for more general things for web, Java, doing that stuff?
So I think it really does depend, because just generally I am a pretty strong like Apple user, but I'll like walk into my programming classes and like open up my MacBook and get laughed at.
Really?
Yes, because at least at NYU, everyone's pretty much like Windows, everything.
Interesting.
Makes a lot of sense. But I think that there are a lot of people that fall within the iOS development pocket of people, and I'm definitely one of them, which is kind of the biggest reason why I was like, oh, I have to get a Mac because I want to be able to use Xcode and make iOS apps. So I think that it really depends on where you fall on the spectrum of development. I'm definitely one of those that likes to use more general and kind of generic IDEs to make things for a whole host of things. But I also want to be able to use that iOS feature of Xcode to make iOS apps. So it does get complicated, and it does depend on what you're kind of interested in coding for. But I think that just hearing about the new Apple processor is really interesting. That Apple Silicon is very interesting because Xcode is infamous for crashing all of the time. Like very unexpectedly, you're working or like compiling a huge package and then it's just gone.
Yeah.
And it's really upsetting. So
Yeah.
I'm really interested to see how that's going to run on the new Apple computers, to see if things work any faster or work any more seamlessly. I think it's really amazing that apps that kind of are already out now can move on to this new system in a pretty seamless looking way. So that looks very promising, but I'm just curious to know how complicated it is going to get, especially for like new developers. As we start migrating towards this new way to code.
Right. Because it's definitely a transitional period.
Yeah.
So it's kind of having one foot in one area and the other, because Apple did say that they will be continuing Intel-based computers. But, you know, with the release of, let's see, over here, I wrote it down, you have the Rosetta 2, the virtualization tech, and also Universal. It seems like they're going to try as hard as possible to make sure that transition is seamless. Matt, what are your thoughts on the ARM-based Apple Silicon, you know, really transitioning to Apple processors across the gate with iPhone, iPad, Mac? I think this is peak Apple we're getting to, right? They want the control. They want it to be this closed system. As a developer, what are you excited about?
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting because this WWDC was probably the most consumer-driven dub that I've seen for the first, 80%, 90% of it. And then everything, like the script flipped as they started talking about, Apple Silicon. And it's really, really cool. I mean, as a developer, if you want to color in the web world, you have a hex value, right? FFFFF for white or 0000 for black. But in the iOS and Mac world, when you want to color, it's one set of code for Mac, which is Cocoa or AppKit, and another set of code for UIKit, UI color versus NS color. So as developers, we've always wanted to kind of have some things kind of merged in some ways. Everything from down to how you make a label is different on a Mac versus how you make it on an iOS device. And so it was interesting to see how, and I think everybody kind of predicted this years back, saying like this should happen at some point. Now, this 2-year transition, Tim talked about how it'll be like it sounds like a 2-year hardware transition to bring all their hardware over into this, starting with the Mac Mini, with the Apple Developer Kit that they're going to be providing for select developers. I think the transition is going to be interesting depending on the type of app that you run. If you have everything inside of Xcode, meaning you're not using a lot of extra OpenGL libraries and things like that require some graphics work, it may not be that difficult of a transition. Similar to how we've seen 32-bit to 64-bit, and even honestly, every time I open up the new Xcode, like this afternoon when I download the new betas, one of the first things I do is to see if my stuff will even compile. And many times, I mean, it's true, right? I mean,
that hashtag relatable, Alexis.
Exactly. I'll spend at least, a day or so just getting things sometimes to compile that may not be compilable. And I'm not doing anything really fancy. So I'll be, really interested to see how this transition works for the stuff that I support, moving forward. But I think honestly, it's a good thing. It's a long-term thing that will be fantastic. And in a few years from now, we'll look back and be very happy with this transition.
Mm-hmm. Are you satisfied with what we have with Rosetta 2 that's going to help make apps? They gave a demo using Maya, and that's what I was curious. And they did mention Adobe, and they did mention that, hey, Final Cut, Logic, these Apple apps are already ready for this transition. They're already ready for Apple Silicon. They shouted out Microsoft, Office products. They're bridging that gap with saying, hey, really intense applications like Maya that aren't going to make that transition, you know, until maybe in a couple years, you can use this thing called Rosetta 2 where it'll just do upon the installation, it'll make it work with the Apple Silicon. And that's what I was nervous about, right? I was nervous about the 3D programs, the programs that are really intense and can barely, you know, handle on current MacBooks. I can't talk to the transition between PowerPC and Intel. You know, I was born in 94, so I can't, I was probably like in 5th grade during that time. But what is your confidence level with the transition?
You know, I think Apple's been preparing this for quite a while. As you know, they talked about. I used to work with I actually still do, with a really high-end finishing application called Autodesk Flame. So if you're familiar with Nuke or even Maya, or, you know, of course, After Effects and Premiere, you know, Flame is a very high-end compositing system, and they've been reworking things to use metal for the past few years. And I think Apple started doing that whole transition to prepare everything for this real big leap moving forward. You know, will it perform the same as it will in 3 years from now after the transition is complete? Probably not. But I think what they've done is create an outline. They don't want to have the rockiness that we saw in the other transitions with some of these higher end performance applications. You know, of course, Final Cut has the, you know, the advantage of being Apple. You know, they can be on top of the game there. And I get very, you know, nervous with Premiere and seeing how it's going to respond. I know you do as well, Sarah. But I think the transition will take place, you know, decently. And the reason is because metal, some of the things that were already very important into the new Apple Silicon have already started to be developed.
Right, with the graphics renderer.
I think it was a transition that was happening years back without us even knowing.
Right, right. You developing strictly Mac apps, right? You have, I mean, you do a lot of work with software that can work on any type of computer, but you personally like these little, I don't want to call them widgets because we said widgets a lot today, and widgets are back, baby. You know, I mean, like widgets are cool now. I miss that back in the day. What was it called? The old widgets?
Dashboard.
Dashboard.
It was dashboard,
yeah.
right? Yeah.
Yeah. Man, I miss that, but it's kind of coming back, right? And we're seeing how macOS is now really similar to iPadOS. We're now merging iOS, iPadOS, macOS all together. Things are looking clean. I don't know how I feel about like the new app icons for Mac. I mean, they're okay, I guess. But I think what they've been mentioning is consistency, right? So as a person who primarily builds those little tools that you keep in the toolbar, right? You give us an example of a macOS little app that you've built that lives in the toolbar, and how is you like, are things going to change? Are you going to build things maybe for, are you going to build, you know, a dedicated widget? How do you think it's going to change in your development process?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I don't think too much is going to have to change on far as how I develop the Mac side of things. One thing that I did see today are the widgets are a lot more capable now. What you can do now in iOS on widgets with iOS 14 has really been duplicated with what you can do now on the Mac, meaning widgets of different size, being able to apply them in and out. So that will be an interesting thing to bring into play on some of the things that I'm working on. But like, you know, as a primary Apple ecosystem developer, these transitions are exciting, and they're not as always as difficult as many people, you know, if you're able to stay in the ecosystem, the transitions aren't that bad and they're easy to do. It's when you're having to bring in other outside libraries and things like that things can be, you know, more and more difficult. Right. But the control center stuff was actually really cool from a menu bar standpoint. The menu bar has kind of been neglected for quite some time, and now the control center really kind of brings that back front and center right. to help kind of wrangle that back into, you know, controllability and simplicity.
So every year at WWDC, they always include students, and it's really cool to see because I think I'm about to say, you know, the young kids out there. I'm 25, so I feel like I'm not too off from you guys, maybe. But a lot of these youngsters in high school and college, they're building a lot of great, cool things. And a mutual friend, Sophia, actually won Apple's WWDC 20 Swift Student Challenge with her app. Alexis, you are her friend. Can you kind of speak about that? I wish we had her here to talk about it. But then also after that, Do you have any ideas brewing? Is anything maybe from today making you excited to kind of get into it? Hey, maybe you'll build a widget. Maybe you'll build, what was it called? The Apple, the clips. Is that what it was called?
App clip.
App clip. Yeah. Maybe the app clips. There are different ways to be a part of this ecosystem without building a full-on app. So maybe talk about some of the things in today's day and age that gets you excited, maybe some problems to solve yourself.
Yeah, that is super exciting. I love that Apple has this sort of challenge for students because I think it just gets a lot of really young people involved in doing something that feels super out of reach. I know when I built my first app and like had it on my phone and I was like, oh my gosh, like I made that. It was very exciting. So I think that it's really cool that they're doing things to get like kids involved. But yeah, the app is called Redawn, and it's like this great kind of chat app that helps connect survivors of sexual assault to different resources to kind of really connect them with the things that they need in order to report and get information. And she was one of the winners of this year's Apple kind of student competition, which was really amazing. I think if I had an idea at that time, I definitely would have applied as well. But I'm so glad that it was someone like her that had won. I think that the amazing thing about different programs that kind of teach young women how to code, especially Code with Classy, is that they kind of make sure that we're very kind of socially conscious and like kind of helping others oriented, which is really amazing. I recently started coding a website that helps build a resource that brings a lot of different things to people's minds that have to do with the Black Lives Matter movement. It just compiles a lot of different resources like petitions and places to donate and places to call. And it has like an auto email generator and a map that compiles Black-owned businesses, just a bunch of different resources that people can use. And I've gotten a lot of people hitting me up about different ways that I can move the website. And I think I have something like maybe 200,000 website individual hits. So, which has been crazy. Yes, it's been insane. But I'm really excited to look into different ways that I can expand. And I think Xcode is definitely an avenue I'm looking towards. And as you said, Apple's making it a lot easier because Xcode can be a little bit finicky to take these different things that you've built and change them up in ways that don't necessarily have to be apps. So I think it would be really interesting to use some of the things that I'm already kind of putting in place, like QR codes that lead straight to the website. Having those app clips is like such a genius idea in like public places. I think that's so great. Yeah. And that can be very helpful, but just like
they basically just rename QR codes. It's like, it's Apple clips now.
Yeah. So I think that there are tons of different ideas that I'm gonna start thinking about. I'm excited.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's really exciting. Yeah, thank you guys so much for your insight. And as we wrap up things, maybe some things outside of the development world, of course, we didn't see any of the hardware announcements that we were kind of expecting. Some of the rumor people in the past 2 days basically gave us a head up that there weren't going to be any hardware updates. People speculated the Apple AirPods getting an update with headphones, as well as this new iMac with the iPad Pro design language. So a little bummed about that, but Apple typically has a second event later in the year that maybe that's where we can expect some of the hardware. So it was very focused on, iOS, iPadOS, and the new macOS Big Sur. So any of you, do you guys have anything that you're just very excited about? Maybe it's like the improvement of Safari. They talked a ton about privacy. They mentioned the home app. There were a lot of things outside of just this transition to the ARM-based Apple Silicon, which is obviously what we talked about most here. So I know for me, as someone who has been using the iPad a ton lately, the iPad Pro, the fact that they added some of the improvements to the Apple Pencil and the ability to use this thing called Scribble, where it's not only going to improve when you're writing in the Notes app with a pencil, to where you're going to be able to interact with that. just like text, basically, with highlighting, moving it around, which again is something we've already seen on other devices. We've seen it in OneNote, but they basically took it there and made it across iPadOS to where now you don't have to put down your iPad every time you want to type something. So say you're searching in Safari or you're searching for an app, you can use your Apple Pencil to scribble in that search bar, and it's going to, compute, oh, what does that mean via text? And it'll find what you're searching for. It'll find, that. So, and again, we've seen that. I can do that with my Dell XPS when I'm writing with my pen. So it's nothing new, but in true Apple fashion, they really do wait to innovate on things, because they're like, okay, we'll let the other guys do it. We'll see what we like. And then we'll make it that much better to where it makes sense. Oh, okay, this is great that now it's not just in the Notes app, but I can take it across iPadOS. I think that's really exciting. And it seems like it's super seamless, and that'll make me just using my pencil with an iPad even more fun. Because a lot of times I do just keep it on the top when I'm not writing notes, and I don't even worry about it. But I think this will get people using Apple Pencil much more. But what about you, Matt?
Yeah, I think, definitely the Apple Pencil thing was really cool. I mean, Apple takes stuff, again, that may have already been out, whether it's the widgets in Android and even the whole, scribble stuff and things like that with the pencil. But I think they've done it in a way that's unique and truly Apple, and really down to the natural human experience level. It'll be interesting to see actually how it actually works and feels in real life. For me, I think that actually translates down to the macOS. It's one of the most, I can almost equate it to the iOS 7. If you remember that, going from iOS 6 to iOS 7, I remember sitting in this hotel in Arizona and watching this keynote like it was yesterday, when they transitioned the entire UI to this very different, flat and beautiful feel. And at the same time, I remember too, Sarah, like I didn't like the icons then either, but now they've grown on me. And I think that's what's going to happen as well with Big Sur is, the Mac OS looks absolutely beautiful. I'm super excited to get to launch a few apps in it and see how things work and feel. They've really put some attention into the detail of the UI in Mac OS, and I haven't seen that in a long time, really, since what they did with iOS 6 to 7.
The improvement in
iOS.
iMessage is so welcome. iMessage on Mac was getting clunky.
Yeah, and it's funny because I'll open up, even Apple Music on my iPhone, and it's smooth, runs great, and then I open up Apple Music on my MacBook Pro, and it's clunky, and you're going, what's going on here? I mean, you think the MacBook Pro is faster, right? But I think again, Apple's on to something with this transition here, from a graphics level, from a CPU level, from entirely how the system works, and this will be a really good transition as we move through into this new silicon over the next few years. And I think the new shiny OS is part of it. I'm excited to get my hands on it.
What did you think about all of the new privacy features?
It's interesting. I don't know if Chrome will ever add something that shows you what all's tracking you at once. It's quite fascinating because, of course, I also do work a little bit in the web development world as well. And even in very high-end websites, hey, this isn't working, and they tell me, well, go use Chrome. I'm like, well, I don't want to use Chrome. I want to use Safari. And I use Safari pretty much 90% of the time. And it's always, very baffled me why in the development world, Chrome is really one of the mainly only accepted browsers. But I think, again, the speed improvements of Safari are always on tap with what they are the year before, faster and faster and faster. And the privacy thing, what we've seen with apps for iOS, we're now seeing that with the new extensions API for Safari. They've opened up the extensions API to make it supposedly easier for people that write extensions for Chrome and other browsers to write extensions for Safari. So I'm excited to see how that works, even creating a whole new section on the App Store for extensions. But those extensions, because they can record your keystrokes, they can do all sorts of things, they are going to have to work through the privacy API. But it doesn't look like the annoying pop-ups that you have right now on macOS. Like every time you want to do something, it's like, oh, it wants to access your, downloads folder or something stupid like that.
Dude, that's the worst.
Yeah, it's very annoying.
Freaking Catalina has been a nightmare, to be honest.
There's been a lot of security things like that. So it looks like, at least with, they didn't talk about too much about it, maybe in the platform State of the Union here in about an hour, but the pop-ups and stuff that the Safari extensions had looked a lot cleaner. and more iOS-like. So I'm excited to see how that plays out as well.
Alexis, what about you? Any one thing stick out to you that you're excited about? Just overall look of things, or the watch, or they've talked about a lot of things.
I love like the small details that they change with every update. I think I as well really love the look of the new Mac UI. It's beautiful, and I had a deep appreciation for that. So I love like all the little things they changed, like group chats, being able to mention people, and the way that that's gonna change. I feel like that's gonna kind of revolutionize iMessage. It feels a lot like Slack in the way that you can
Yeah.
use it.
And it's similar to almost email, which I hate email, but I'm glad some of those features are coming over, because there are certain conversations that I want pinned at the top on my message app, right? And having the ability to mention people in group messages. I mean, that is huge.
And like threads, I saw, and when I saw them kind of announce that, I was like, oh, that's interesting, because it's something I see used really, really well in like other platforms, but I never thought about that for like iMessage. So it'll be really interesting.
Yeah. Again, Apple is the king and queen of taking from over here, taking from over here. Very rarely do they have something that's super original. I would say one thing recently that has been 100% Apple and everyone has followed are AirPods, the truly 100% wireless, because before them, everyone was just putting, you know, the freaking cables on everything. So I will give them credit for that. But I think with software and all these things, like we saw in the new iOS update with the movable widgets, you know, that's very, that's basically, they're just taking that from Android. Everyone in Android knows and loves that. They're just very good at knowing what their users will enjoy and just adopting it 2 years later and putting their sprinkles on top. It wasn't as like rah, 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 oh my gosh, because maybe that comes more with hardware announcements. I don't know. Sometimes maybe people are more like meh with software, but I think it's just like the design consistency throughout all of these, you know, iPhone, iPad, Mac. I think it's just going to be such a better experience. And you really don't know that some of that experience is kind of broken until you see the new macOS and the new iPadOS. It's like, okay, all this stuff does make more sense.
You know, I'm actually a HomeKit lover, so I have like tons of stuff here, and my whole HomeKit setup, cameras and all that type of stuff. So for me, seeing some of the HomeKit improvements that are coming up within the Home app, and of course, Google and Amazon, they all joined this alliance recently as well to help make it to where when you go buy a camera off the shelf, you don't have to keep looking at all the stickers for support. So I'm excited to see some of that happening, but it's been nice to see some of the improvements. You know, I have a couple of the Logitech Circle cameras to be able to see how that's going to work with Apple TV. And also, I love CarPlay. Living in New York City, I actually get to drive a car sometimes.
I didn't even think about that. Yeah, I kind of tuned out with the CarPlay stuff. I was like, oh, I haven't had a car in 4 years.
They've done a lot of improvements into maps that, of course, all Google Maps has had some of that for a while. But that is going to be interesting to see how that works. It was surprising for me to see. I think the figure is like 93% or something of all new cars in the US have CarPlay.
Wow.
People are actually starting to use it now. It's really great. I honestly, personally, I'm not buying a Tesla because it doesn't have CarPlay.
Wow.
I get made fun of for that. I know, but I'll probably go BMW. You know, and again, I like how CarPlay works and interacts, and they've added a couple key little features in there that I think that will help take it to the next level.
Alexis, Matt, thank you so much for being here and discussing WWDC 2020. Make sure to check out their links in the description below. They are everywhere. Alexis dominates the TikTok scene, but then she obviously is, I was about to be like, but she's obviously super smart. TikTokers can be smart. Those things aren't mutually exclusive, but she's obviously doing a lot of cool projects. So make sure to check out Alexis. And then Matt, again, he has a ton of cool of his own personal software. So I'll link his website down in the description below, as well as some of your other projects. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Make sure you're subscribed, like this video, and until next time, stay peachy. Okay.